It's a bit unusual, but for this ambassador series of brandylibrary.tv, we're already having a glass before we even started. Well, you know, when whiskey is good, why the wait? So Ludo here for Grants will talk about blended Scotch, and a great one. Ludo, very nice having you here.
It's a pleasure being here.
All right, so what about it? What about Grants? What's the history behind it?
I guess that's a good place to start.
Yes.
Well, Grant's Whisky is Scotland's oldest family-owned blended whisky. Our history spans over 3 centuries and 5 generations of the same family. It was first blended by William Grant back in 1898, and today our blend is owned and managed by the 5th generation of his family.
All right.
So William was born in a small village in the Scottish Highlands, a place called Ducrocq, a famous village in the whisky world.
Mm-hmm.
And initially he started in the whisky world as a single malt distiller. In fact, the first distillery that he built was a single malt distillery back in 1887. But of course, back then, single malt whisky was not sold around the world as it is today. William initially was simply a distiller, and he would sell his single malt onto blenders who would blend it, bottle it, package it, and sell it to quite a few overseas markets, even back then. The bottom line is, if William wanted to make his name in the whisky world, he had to become a blender. And that's what he did in 1898, and that's when Grant's Whisky was born. It came here to the US pretty early. His son, John, traveled to the US in 1904 to introduce his father's blended whisky to US customers.
All right, so it's been here for a little while, and yet we don't see it everywhere. I know you're on a journey to accomplish that presence everywhere. You're traveling quite a bit, but now, well, then why should we be drinking it?
So what I would like to say to that, first of all, is you can find Grants all around the world. Of course, it's the 4th largest blended whisky in the world, and so therefore the 4th largest Scotch whisky, blended whisky being the biggest category in the Scotch whisky world. It is available in somewhere like 180 countries, and of course you can find it in the US as well, in quite a few places as well. So as the taste is concerned, it's perhaps not surprisingly, it has a Speyside nose. I say not surprisingly because when William was born in Dufftown, in the heart of Speyside, he started distilling whiskey in Speyside, and he became a blender in Speyside. So it's perhaps not surprising that his whiskey is more of a Speyside character than anything else, and that means sweet flavors, fruity flavors, and just a hint of peat, a hint of smoke. So this whiskey is mostly honeyed, and you might get some fruit flavors like pears and apples.
Yeah, and it smells lovely.
Thank you.
So now, just for our viewers, to locate this world of blended Scotch within the world of Scotch whisky, of course, there is the single malt Scotch, and there's the blended Scotch. Now, what is special about Grants within the world of blended Scotch?
You're right. I think sometimes people are familiar with the different regions as far as single malt production is concerned, and often for blends, people don't know that certain blended whiskies can be more smoky or lighter than others.
Yeah.
If you look at our range, for instance, this is the Family Reserve is our best-selling blend, but we have one called Grant's Ale Cask, which is a blended whiskey finished in ex-beer or ale casks. This one is slightly more subtle, slightly more floral. At the same time, we also have one called Grant's Sherry Cask, which is finished in sherry cask. It was actually the first blended whiskey to be finished in sherry cask when it was launched back in 2001. That one is a bit heavier, a bit richer, and some whiskies from other blenders can be very smoky, very peaty. So it depends on which flavor and taste profile the master blender wants to give to its blend.
Now, will you be revealing some secrets here? What about the wheat that is used?
Yes,
and what about?
Yeah, I guess, yeah. So what is a blend? So a blend is a blend of the 2 types of whiskies that are distilled in Scotland: single malt whiskey and single grain whiskies. The challenge with blends, of course, is certainly as far as we're concerned, we don't stick to one recipe. You won't find a book where you can see exactly how many single malts and how many single grains will go in our blend next week when we do the next vatting. At the end of the day, it's down to our master blender's discretion how many single malts and how many single grains go in it. Now, we do find that in general, certain things happen. For instance, we know that the younger our blended whiskey is, the more single grain we use as opposed to single malt. So we use a majority of single grain whiskies and a minority of single malt whiskies for our younger blends. That's simply because younger single grain whiskies add a lot of maturity to a blend. They add a lot of wood spiciness. They add quite a bit of sweetness as well. Those you might get some vanilla, some toffee flavors in here. A lot of these will come from the single grain whiskey. We do find also that as our blends get older, for instance, we have a 12-year-old, an 18-year-old. We in 2009 launched a 25-year-old. Now, for our older blends, we find that actually we need to do the opposite. So we need to use a majority of single malt whiskies and a minority of single grain whiskies. So generally in a blend you will find somewhere between 20 to 30 different single malts and usually 2 or 3 single grain whiskies. Of course, we'll use a lot of our own whiskies, mostly Speyside whiskies as well, because that's a style that we're trying to give to our blend. And there will be a lot of Girvan single grain.
That's your grain distillery, right?
It's our grain distillery, yeah. It was built by a 4th generation family member, who's currently our life president, Charles Gordon. He built a distillery in 1963 in the southwest of Scotland, in a place called Girvan. And it's a very important distillery for us, of course, because the vast majority of what you will find in our blend, the key constituent really is Girvan single grain. It's distilled in an interesting way, a very unusual way.
We want to know about this then.
Of course, you're familiar with single grain distillation. It's a column distillation process. But one of the things that we do in Girvan is we distill under vacuum. And nobody else does this in Scotland. And it's quite interesting because single grain production is different from single malt production, especially the mashing stage. There's no filtration. All the bits of barley, the bits of wheat, so a single grain is made from barley and wheat. And all the bits of barley and the bits of wheat will go through to fermentation and it will go into the column stills for distillation. Now, the beauty of distilling under vacuum is that you can boil off the alcohol at a lower temperature, and therefore the bits of wheat and the bits of barley will just flow from tray to tray inside the column stills. They won't stick onto the trays inside the stills, and therefore that allows us to produce a really crisp and fruity and floral kind of single grain, which actually you do get a bit of this character here in the family reserve. Feel free to add some water as well to it to open it up if you'd like to see what sort of flavors come out with a bit of water.
Okay, so Girvan is a lot for the blend. What about the single malts?
Yes, so we have 4 single malt distilleries. Initially, William built 2 single malt distilleries in Dufftown, and the 5th generation of the family built another 2. In 1990, we opened up a distillery called Kinninvie in Dufftown. And in 2007, we opened up a new distillery right next to our Girvan single grain distillery. And that single malt is called Ailsa Bay. And it's quite interesting because although it's distilled in the lowlands, the style that we're trying to produce at Ailsa Bay is a Speyside style. Of course, because this distillery is there to provide excellent quality single malts for Grant's Whisky, our other blends, and other companies' blends as well. Because, you know, all the distillers and all the blenders in Scotland all work together, exchanging whiskey with one another.
Yeah. And what about the other 2 distilleries?
So Glenfiddich, yes, which is an established single malt. That's the first distillery that William built back in 1887. And the other one is called the Balvenie, which is quite popular here in the US as well. And this one was built in 1892.
So is it a bit, is it safe to say it for our drinkers, for those who like their single malt and love Balvenie and Glenfiddich, that if maybe they want their daily dram, if they want something maybe a bit easier, that they should definitely have some grants?
You definitely get the family style for sure. If you look at our range of whiskies, whether they're single malts, blended Scotch whiskies, or blended malt, we have a blended malt called Monkey Shoulder. All these whiskies have a Speyside style. So you definitely can tell that they come from the same family.
No, that's lovely. Definitely opening up.
what I love about it as well is its balance. It's it's much easier to produce a whiskey that has a particularly strong, I don't know, sweet note or particularly smoky flavor. What you get here is loads of different flavors, beautifully balanced.
But all in harmony.
Yes, that's the idea, absolutely. And of course, the credit goes to the guys at the distillery who distill our whiskies, but also our master blender. The first master blender in our company's history was William Grant when he blended his whiskey in 1898. And since William, we've only had 5 other master blenders.